Hello, welcome back to the Controversial Cinema Podcast. I'm Liz.
I'm Cosette.
And today we're going to continue watching interesting, fucked up, disturbing, etc. films. And this is technically our very first episode that we're going to be publishing, and how fitting for the first episode to be about Tusk.
Yep. First episode officially talking about a movie. We had a little mini intro episode just for you guys to get to know us. But obviously it's not like overly out there on the iceberg. But, you know, it is a good little toe dip for our first official episode.
Yes, it's very disturbing if you don't like body horror. It would definitely get you there. But yeah, Tusk is honestly I wouldn't say it's a feel-good movie because it's not, but it's definitely one of the more enjoyable films because it's not so serious.
Yeah, and it has that comedic relief of like the hee-hee ha-ha moments. I mean, I found it pretty disturbing, but that's because of certain elements of it. And like, I'm not even someone who gets bothered by body horror. Like, I've seen like Akira and like stuff like that, and it doesn't necessarily bother me. It was just like specific moments of the body horror that I was like, whoa. I was like, that is fucked up looking. I don't need to ever see that again. So as most episodes, we'll give like a brief little spoiler-free summary of the movie. If you like it, pause the episode, go watch it, and then come back for our more in-depth summary, more about the director and the movie itself, and then our thoughts. So basically, the plot of the movie is a brash and arrogant podcaster gets more than he bargained for when he travels to Canada to interview a mysterious recluse who has a rather disturbing fondness for walruses.
Yeah, a common gag throughout this movie is the main character's name is Wallace, and oh boy, the tongue twister, first of all.
So yeah, Justin Long plays in this movie as Wallace, the main character, and he is arrogant and an asshole. I wouldn't even use the word brash. He's just an asshole who, can we say, gets his comeuppance a little bit just for how much of an asshole he is?
Yeah. You feel a little bad in moments, and then you're reminded, and then you feel bad. It's a constant tug of war.
I mean, it's Justin Long, right? So, like, generally you kind of know what kind of characters he plays and what you're about to get yourself into.
Getting a little more detailed about it, if it sounded interesting to you and you're interested in what kind of body horror could go on, by all means, watch it, have a laugh, get disturbed, come back.
Yep.
Earlier I said it's really fitting that this is the first episode that we're doing because Wallace and his friend are podcasters.
Yep.
I forget what his friend's name is. What is
I also do.
Oh my God.
It's fine. Sorry. He's played by Joel Osment, okay?
Teddy and Wallace are podcasters, and this is a very 2014 movie. The humor is very indicative of it. Their podcast is called NOTSEE Party. So the Not See Party. How edgy, careful, sharp edges and whatnot. But they are the most dude bros to ever dude bro in their podcast. They laugh at people's misfortunes.
Yeah, because they're watching a video of this guy, and he like does stuff with swords, and he ends up cutting his own leg off. And this sets up the plot of the movie because they think it's so fucking funny. And Wallace is like, we got to interview this guy. Like, we got to go to Canada and interview this guy. So that's the motivator for him going to Canada.
Mm-hmm. Wallace goes to Canada, and we have a really, really fun cameo from Harley from Epic Mealtime as kind of the Canadian TSA agent, kind of a border security. It's really fucking funny.
Yeah.
But Wallace is in Canada. He is driving to this kid's house, and upon arrival, it's the funeral for the kid. The guy killed himself, and so Wallace is definitely not going to be interviewing him, and he is so pissed. He's like, how could this dude be so selfish? He couldn't hold out for like 2 more days for me to talk to him. Now what the fuck am I going to do? I'm in Canada and there's nothing for me to do here anymore.
Yep. Because, he really could have monetized on that last interview. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
No, he's like more upset that he's not getting his fucking interview than he is about the guy killing himself. So there you go, setting up a little bit of character arc right there of just telling you who he is as a person. So he's like, well, what the fuck am I going to do? So he's in this bar getting a drink because he's trying to figure out, like, I came all this way. What the hell am I going to do? And I think he goes to the bathroom or something. But anyway, he finds a flyer on the wall. And basically, it's an ad for like, hey, like I have some really interesting stories to tell about my life. If you're kind of into that stuff, come to my house at this address.
Free room and board. Just don't be gross. Help around the house and listen to me yap.
Yep, basically that's what it was. So Wallace is like, hey, look, you know what? We'll check it out because this guy's got some fun stories, right? Maybe I'll get something out of it for the podcast. Whatever. So he goes to the address and it's this like giant, basically it's a mansion where this old man in a wheelchair is living by himself.
Wallace has zero stranger danger. Like the fact that somebody might harbor ill will towards him just does not equate in his brain. So he immediately has to like use the restroom. He allows this man to make him tea that he freely drinks, and he just has zero social awareness that this is a stranger. He may seem like a sweet old guy who's in a wheelchair, but that is definitely not the case.
Yeah. So Howard is the name of the old guy, and he basically starts sharing stories of his life from when he was in the war. He mentions how he like knew Ernest Hemingway, which to me is just a great big red fucking flag. If you don't know who Ernest Hemingway is, he's a famous author. If you do know who he is, you probably know he was a drunken asshole. So he mentions that he at one point gets stranded in like, I don't know if he specifies what country it was.
For some reason, I'm remembering like the stretch of land between Alaska and Russia.
Yeah.
I think that's geographically where it was. He gave the specific name, but I do not remember.
Right, don't remember that. Very specific. And he ends up getting stranded there and having to survive, where he makes like a symbiotic friendship with a walrus that he just called Mr. Tusk.
They said it. They said the name of the movie.
Whoa! Roll credits. So yeah, he basically is like, yep, I lived, like I survived through this friendship with Mr. Tusk. Well, if you remember that we said that Wallace was given a tea, you can pretty much guess where that goes.
Yeah, he finds the penis bone for the tusk.
Oh my god.
On Howard's mantle, and he's like, no fucking way. And as this story is progressing, you can just see Wallace succumbing to whatever the fuck whiskey, alcohol, it wasn't whiskey or alcohol, but Howard put in the tea, and Wallace passes out.
Yep. Wallace passes out from the tea. Big fucking shocker. Men do not know how to not take drinks from strangers, apparently. That will come back up again later in another episode. And so he wakes up in a wheelchair. Howard comes in there also in a wheelchair. I don't remember exactly how their conversation went, but obviously Wallace was like freaking out over the fact that he had no fucking legs. And he just like kept freaking out. And I guess it got on Howard's nerves.
Wallace was like, I need my phone. I need to call my family, call the doctor. And Howard was like, no, I took your phone. Like, you're so upset. The doctor who came in to amputate your legs because a spider bit you, and we couldn't let the venom spread more than it already did. And, the doctor really suggested that we take your phone away, let you process, and it just we'll revisit. You need to heal right now. And
it's such bull.
It is, because Wallace is high on painkillers, and bad feels because he's missing his legs. And so he essentially is like, okay, sure, whatever. Like, as Howard leaves him to kind of stew, he goes, I'm so sorry for your loss. As he's snickering and leaving the room because he's like, oh no, you lost your legs. Like, how horrible for you.
He's a little mean old man. Oh, God. I don't remember what happens after that exactly.
I mean, we're kind of skipping through a lot of the flashbacks.
I just remember at one point, like, Howard came back and, like, Wallace pissed him off. So he stood up from his wheelchair and smacked the fuck out of him.
Yes. So that happened later that night over dinner.
Yeah,
whenever
dinner.
Essentially from the pain meds, Wallace is pretty much immobilized from the shoulders down. And he is very slowly finally starting to wise up to Howard might be talking some real bullshit here. Yeah. And so he starts challenging him, being like, what kind of spider bit me?
Yep.
There is no doctor, is there really? And eventually he pisses Howard off so much that Howard gets up from his wheelchair, waltzes over to him, and just smacks the fuck out of him.
Yeah, it's so funny. My God, the moment this man just stands the fuck up and you're like seeing the shock on Wallace's face that this man is also not in a wheelchair, paralyzed or whatever, and he just smacks him. It's like, oops.
Yeah. He essentially leaves him with like, you can't go back to your old life. Like, you are forever changed now. You better get over it and get with it. Yeah.
And then eventually Wallace is drugged again.
Shocker.
And it basically just cuts to some scenes of some medical shit happening. Looks very messy. And there's like pictures on the wall of like what he's doing. And fast forward to where Wallace wakes up.
Wallace wakes up and realizes that he has been surgically made into a humanoid walrus.
He's Wallace the Walrus now.
I cackled like a dumbass when I made that mental connection. I was so over it. But yeah, he wakes up and he's in this like quasi beach seafront place. There's a pool by him, and Howard has set up these projections that show, you know, kind of like
Antarctica, basically, like a winterscape with some seagulls.
Yeah. And it's
with a beach ball.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna go fucking play with it. It's like, oh my God.
And Howard comes back and he has food for him. He brought him raw fish for him to eat.
This man is Delulu on every level of every word. This man is so Delulu.
Truly.
Wallace just starts like fucking screaming, and Howard just starts like maniacally ranting about how he's a walrus now and he needs to accept that and live as a walrus. There's like some philosophy that Howard has thrown in there, and that walruses are like, life is cruel and men are evil, better to be a walrus, basically, is the philosophy he's going for. Wallace just continues screaming, because what else is there to do when you have been turned into a fuck? And it's nasty. It looks real nasty. This surgery was not done well.
It is a miracle that he's like alive and kicking to some degree. But yeah, it was not done well at all. Or it was done a little bit too well, rather. And we're all getting some uncanny valley walrus action.
Yeah. It just shows like how Howard is trying to get him to be a walrus. He takes him swimming, and that eventually almost drowns Wallace, because obviously he can't fucking swim. He's too heavy and he doesn't have a way to move. There's like some side plot shit with like a character for Johnny Depp, and he's a detective. We're not even gonna go into all that because it was a damn mess. But it helps Wallace's friend Teddy and his girlfriend to eventually find him. And there's also another subplot with Teddy and the girlfriend. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, it is a very, very well-made movie with how balanced it is between flashbacks, present day. Like, every time you start feeling sympathetic for Wallace, you're shown why he's not God's gift to mankind.
Right.
And you really shouldn't feel that bad for him.
Right, because he's an asshole.
And
isn't very nice to his girlfriend.
No. And right as Allie and Teddy are finally able to find Wallace, Howard is at his final stage with Wallace.
Yeah.
You know, he has fully convinced himself that he is really going to make Wallace embrace his inner walrus and leave behind humanity, because Howard essentially challenges him to a duel because it's found out that Howard obviously had to kill Mr. Tusk all those years ago in order to survive.
Right.
And he holds a lot of guilt around that because he loved Mr. Tusk. Apparently, Mr. Tusk was the only person who ever treated him with any kindness in this human earth or whatever. So he's like, fight me. Either
as a walrus.
Yes.
Okay, Howard is also in a walrus suit at this point.
Yeah. And Howard is like, either way, your life is going to change forever after this moment, because either you fucking die or you kill me and you're forced to live out the rest of your days as a walrus.
Yeah.
There's no turning back at this point.
Right. So at the point that Teddy and Allie, that's Wallace's girlfriend's name, find Wallace, he has won the battle. Howard is dying because basically Wallace just ends up being so sick of it, he goes apeshit. And also fracturing his, mental state in doing that. They find him, it cuts to this scene of a very sad-looking zoo. I mean, seriously, the saddest zoo you've ever seen. And eventually you find out that Wallace is living his life at the zoo as a walrus. I mean, he's got a little pool, he's got a little den, they feed him raw fish, and it's nasty.
It is, yeah.
It's so gross.
It's the saddest little rehabilitation center ever, because we get thrown this... I will say, out of all of the flashbacks, this one's probably the only one that bothers me, of a moment that Wallace and Allie had where she is talking about how she misses the old Wallace when he would be sweet to her. And, I think she mentioned crying, and Wallace was like, I can't remember the last time I cried. And Allie goes into this familial story where, I guess, I don't know, her uncle or whoever tells her that, like, crying is good because it separates us from the animals. Yep. As Allie is coming to grips, looking over Wallace in this zoo rehabilitation center, she starts crying, and then Wallace starts crying.
You see like a tear roll down.
Because, yes, even though he is a Wallace,
a Wallace the walrus now.
Yeah, his humanity is still there deep, deep down, even though... Honestly, after that, I too would be so traumatized. I would not want anyone to come near me at that point.
I just dissociate all the time.
Yeah. So,
I'd be like, yeah, I'm a walrus. Thank you.
Yep. And the movie ends with Teddy getting Allie, and they leave Wallace to live out his walrus life.
Yep. To live out his walrus days. That's it. Again, like there was some weird side plot shit happening that we didn't really get into because honestly, I don't even know how to explain it, and I'm not going to. Half the time, Johnny Depp's character, you can't understand what the fuck he's saying, and it's just awful. And at first, when he comes on screen, you're like, who the fuck is this? And after a while, you're watching it, you're like, is that Johnny Depp? Is this Johnny Depp right now? And it's wild. That's all I have to say. Just watch the movie and see it for yourself. Tusk was a 2014 A24 movie. I forget that it's an A24 movie, which makes no sense because it really does fit in their bag. But at the same time, I'm like...
It's because it's so deeply unserious that we're so used to A24 films being like some really serious or not that this movie isn't genuine, but the most A24 films take themselves seriously too, whereas this one, no, you're in it for a ride. Enjoy it.
And if you're wondering who directed this, then it being so unserious, you'll be like, okay. But Kevin Smith directed this movie. If you do not know how Kevin Smith like who that is, he's known for Jay and Silent Bob movies, okay? And he's high all the time. I don't know the name of his podcast, but he does have a podcast now with his co-star and longtime friend, Jason. Justin Long, Haley Joel Osment, and Johnny Depp play in this movie. So it's a pretty stacked cast, all things considered. And the guy who plays Howard is also a pretty well-known actor, and he does a phenomenal job. He's a phenomenal actor. Who is Kevin Smith? Well, he was born in 1970, and he was raised in New Jersey, and he grew up in a Catholic household.
A lot of Catholics tonight.
Yeah, on the night we're recording this, we've talked about several movies, and don't worry, you will see a trend in Catholicism. Obviously, he's most well known for his Jay and Silent Bob movies, but his movie Chasing Amy with Ben Affleck actually brought him a lot of notoriety and kind of brought him into the film scene, and then obviously Tusk did a lot for him too. And also, just thought this was a fun fact, apparently he's an unaccredited writer on the movie Coyote Ugly.
Oh. Okay, different vibe.
Love that movie, but wouldn't have pegged that one for Kevin Smith. How did Kevin Smith come up with the idea for this movie? Well, aside from him just being high all the time, because that's just who he is as a person.
This is a very, I thought of this when I was high and I committed to the bit.
Right. But he got the idea for this movie because there was this like online thing going around. I don't want to call it a meme, but it was, like, oh my God, did you see this on the internet? And there was this ad, and I believe it was based out of the UK, where a man was offering to rent out a room in his house for free on the condition that whoever rents out the room dress as a walrus for 2 hours every day. And Kevin Smith and his co-host on the podcast, I believe, Kevin was sharing this story, and he just thought it was so fucking funny. And so he was like, you know what? That's a great movie idea. And that's basically how he got it. In an interview with Dresden Hollywood, Kevin Smith actually described the film as a movie that shouldn't exist. I don't know if he's being too harsh on himself, but there's like a little YouTube behind the scenes that Kevin Smith himself made on the making of Tusk. I think it's literally called like Behind the Walrus or something like that. It's free on YouTube. You can watch it. And he truly was high every day of fucking filming. Like,
for that fact alone, it's quite impressive that this is done as a cohesive film as it is. Because like, they are high thoughts, but that is sober execution.
Yeah. And because like every time it would be like a new day, he'd be like, yeah, man, like we're either about to start filming or we're going to end filming, and I'm fucking high as a kite right now. And I'm like, God damn, okay. So I don't think it's a movie that shouldn't exist. It's just odd. Like it's just weird. I mean, we're going to be talking about a lot worse movies throughout this.
This is a drop in the bucket. This is a walk in the park. There's a slight breeze. It's
fine.
So nice.
It's fine.
In comparison.
But, I mean, following Kevin Smith's thoughts on the movie, here's what we thought on the movie. Liz, what did you think?
This was a really enjoyable film for me to watch. There are certain types of kind of horror films that even the horror that's in them, my dumb brain decides to laugh it off because I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's so outlandish. And even the parts that are meant to be disturbing, I was still like, this is so campy. I can't be really grossed out about this. I'm so glad that's not happening to me. But like, this is like so funny to me.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie is really kind of like split on if you want to choose to focus on the humor and the comedy, or if you want to focus on the more serious side of it, which we didn't really talk about, but God, Howard just droning on and on about his sad little backstory. Could you have an argument about humanity and bodily autonomy? Yes, you could, but it depends on if you want to.
Yeah. And I definitely, one of my, because I also enjoyed watching the movie, that, like I said earlier, there were just some parts that disturbed me. Like, there would be like moments where Justin Long's head would go back into the walrus skin. I mean, I call it the walrus skin because I don't know. I mean, it's his skin and probably other people's skin too, but it's just, like it would go back into it, almost like an
Very.
uncircumcised male organ, and I just didn't like watching that. It really just hit something in me that I was like, you know what? I shouldn't see that as a person. You know, that's just not something I should see, and therefore I will choose to not think about this.
Except for right now.
Yeah. Except for when I do quite often, actually, because it fucking scarred me. So that was one, that's like one of the reasons why I find it disturbing, just because like the imagery in it, I was like, okay. I mean, Justin Long is Michael Parks. That's the guy who played Howard.
Oh.
Michael Parks played him. He's a great actor. Justin Long is obviously a great actor and does this, you know, he commits to the bit. It's kind of what he does.
I'm glad he's such a nice person, IRL, because he is so convincing as an awful human being
Yes.
that I literally had to go back afterwards and be like, he is nice,
Not how
though.
he is. That's not how he is, guys. And like, if you've seen him in Barbarian, like, you know, you again have to remind yourself that's not who he is.
He was so good in Barbarian.
He was so good. I mean, Justin Long just hits the nail on the head every time. So obviously have to get a shout out for that. His character wasn't likable as shit, but that was definitely the point, because I mean, who wants to watch like a good and I think that's why it needed that lighthearted. Yeah, the lighthearted, like, and you could laugh at it because you know that he's like a terrible human being. Like it would have been totally so different had they done it to a like Teddy, right? Like it would have been totally different movie. Again, like I mentioned, the Howard having a friendship with Ernest Hemingway, red flag. Okay, he should have gotten out of there. Not a good thing, in my opinion. But that's just like a funny little whatever. But some genuine critique I have is that this movie, while obviously made very well, I think it had a lot of weird scenes that would drag on for just way too fucking long. And like you're kind of sitting there after a certain point, you're like, why is this still going? Like, why is this scene has not ended? And I wouldn't even necessarily call it a pacing issue. It was just kind of used for like these dude bro humor moments that Kevin Smith obviously enjoys because of just who he is as a person.
I mean, he was high every single day.
And he was high every single day. So he was probably behind you directing that scene, and he was laughing his ass off. But watching it sober and as just a general like movie viewer, I was like, this is way too long, man. Like, you could have shaved some runtime off of this shit and just either not done the scene, left it out, or cut that shit like in half. So that was definitely one of my big critiques, is that it just had those weird moments that I was like, this could be over.
Yeah. And those Guy Lapointe scenes were definitely the biggest victim to that. I will say that is something that I didn't catch whenever we watched it together, because the film is so well paced, and like the moments that are hilarious are so good that I think for me it kind of carried me through those really awkward moments, because that's also what I expect out of a lot of comedies. Like, it's been a long time since I've seen a new comedy, first of all, but especially from this era, like scenes that lasted for way too long were so rampant that I think the moments where it hit the mark masked it for me.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, like I'm still laughing from the previous joke. Like this scene is almost over. Now we're getting into more surgical things, and oh my God, you need so much therapy. Like, you could have just gone to therapy for your little walrus incident and the world would have been so much better
Men
off.
will do anything but go to therapy, truly. And I guess you could say, like, make the argument, oh, well, I mean, they're to break it up. Like, they're to bring those moments of humor. But it's almost like the scenes that had, like, terrible shit going on, but then, like, he made a good joke. Like, it worked better for me. Like, we didn't need to break it up with these long ass weird scenes, in my opinion.
Well, and I would also argue that, like, you don't need the weird scenes, because even though there's horrible shit happening in this movie, it's still not really taking itself so seriously. So the impact of these things happening is not gonna hit the same way that, like, Terrifier does.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not. The stakes are high, but it's executed in such a campy way that it's like, oh, well, you're fucked anyways. Like
the part where Howard like says sorry for your loss and then like snickers. Like, okay, that was great. Love that. We don't need Johnny Depp just like ad-libbing for like however long in a scene, and you just are along for the ride.
I will say I did really enjoy that short cutaway scene where we find out that Howard was the doctor, and
like that was funny. I do put that in a little bit into the category of that went on way too long.
I know.
But like it was funny, but like it almost like became unfunny to me because I'm like, dude, this could be over. Like you hit the mark, you hit the point, and then it just kept going on past the point.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, we get it. Move the fuck on.
Right, like please, we could have trimmed like 20 fucking minutes off of this runtime probably. just on stupid shit. But I mean, if you're even, I wouldn't even say necessarily into disturbing movies, but like if you're into A24 and like you like seeing what's on their, you know, filmography list, you just like movies that are like a little weird, but you have a higher tolerance to be like see some pretty weird shit go down, this is definitely the movie for you. I wouldn't put it as like, you know, as high as like other disturbing movies that often get a lot of notoriety. But yeah, I mean, if you're an A24 watcher, I think this is pretty digestible for you because A24 has a lot of weird shit anyways.
If you are looking for a film that is nostalgic for the early 2010s, you will be so pleased with this movie because I truly mean it. My favorite cameo was Harley from Epic Mealtime. Like, so much. Like, whenever we were watching this, I'm like, is that Harley?
Yeah, from Epic Mealtime.
The other thing to know when watching this movie, Wallace is really awful in a lot of different ways. He's also very, like, microaggressive towards his girlfriend.
Oh my God.
He comes up with this accent for her that she definitely doesn't have. He also, like, cheats on her constantly. Like, so...
He's meant to be a piece of shit. Like, in every way possible that you could probably imagine.
Yeah. And he succeeds, and that's how we end up with this wonderfully campy, disturbing flick.
Yeah. And I see like a lot of people review this movie on Letterboxd and they're like, it's trash. What does it have to say? Well, and I'm like, bro, that means you took that shit way too serious. Like,
it can be your trash if you have the right mindset.
Right. I'm not saying it has to be like we're not making Oppenheimer over here. No. You know, like we're not Christopher Nolan or like Quentin Tarantino with some like social commentary or whatever.
Yeah, if you accept that this movie is deeply unserious and fucked up, you're going to have so much more fun with it.
And if you're also into recreational activities, maybe just do it then.
If you're into gardening.
Yeah, if you're into gardening and really like to touch grass, please highly recommend that avenue as well.
I will use the 10-point scale for this one because I think the 5 scale doesn't offer enough variation. For judging this film for what it is, I feel like I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's that funny to me that I'm like, yeah, I anytime someone wants to watch this, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I actually was thinking of the same rating with 7 out of 10. Obviously, with the right, like, it's not like, again, you're not watching Oppenheimer, right? But like you're kind of having a good time with it. There's some pretty good jokes that land. You know, it's not all just dupe road humor. There's some of it that's really smart, and and yeah, I mean it's enjoyable. It's obviously well made. I don't think A24 will put their money behind it and not. Even though like 2014, they're not like A24 here in 2024, but like they still had to put some respect on that. So I'd recommend it, and I'd recommend it to a lot more people than like a lot of the other movies we're going to talk about.
This is definitely the safest option. This lands in the 3-foot deep part of a pool, and I think that is a totally respectable place to stay if you decide to.
Correct. You don't need to go deep, but if you do,
boy, do we got something for you.
Yeah, boy, do we have more episodes for you. So please stay tuned and see what else we're going to be talking about with the Controversial Cinema podcast.
If you liked this episode, feel free to find us on all of the social medias because starting the episode with a podcast and ending it plugging around.
Yep.
But yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
You'll find superstition a contagious thing. Some people let it get the better of them. I don't think you will.
No.